right, Miss Karen. First off, thank you for being here. I love talking to you. I tell people all the time when I come across them, if they ever mention your name, I say, I love that woman. I just really do. I think you're genuine and authentic, which is very refreshing. And I love that from people. So whenever I come across somebody like you, I'm always super excited to nab your attention up and expertise any chance I can get. So thank you so much for being here on this summit. I'm excited to talk to you. But let's just say, for the sake of maybe anybody not knowing who you are, doesn't know much about you, if you want to give just kind of a brief background into who you are, and then what kind of got you into the authoring world, and out of all the things to jump into, why the children's book world?
Well, thank you. That's such a nice intro, and the feeling is mutual for
Yeah,
sure. So basically, I actually started off in the illustration world, which I guess already kind of answers why the children's book world. But I've also always been very much into writing. I love writing. I love books. I've read an embarrassing amount of them. And when I was in illustration, I started seeing how I have a company called Get Your Book Illustrations. And so I work with many illustrators. So I see a lot of books. So I started really seeing how authors, what they run into. And a couple of the main things were, their book is illustrated, it's ready to publish. And they're like, what do I do now? Where do I publish it? How do I like no clue of the next step, right? Which is understandable. But I started seeing more and more, they put all this time and effort and money into the book and creating the book, because creating a fully illustrated book isn't super cheap, right? So, and then they had no plan. And then I would go check sometimes a few months later, see they didn't have any reviews, nothing was really happening. And I really didn't like that. I felt like, um, it's almost setting them up for failure, even though it's not the illustrator's job. But I really just felt like I wanted to help them and I wanted to help them do better. And also sometimes just the quality of their writing. I also really felt like, wow, if they had just written a better manuscript, if they were aware of writing craft. Anyway, so that's how I then ended up with starting Children's Book Mastery and helping authors to really write better books in the first place and know all the steps through how do you get it edited and published and marketed and actually make a real go of it depending on their individual goals, but that they can really work towards their own goals.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I do know that illustration company. So it wasn't the biggest leap over to the children's book world, since you already had the illustration kind of aspect and business under your belt. So that makes perfect sense. So you mentioned one thing kind of while you were talking, and since this is a marketing summit and it's fiction, but we're going to be focusing on children's books because that's your expertise. I know every summit I go to, I'm a part of, or authors that I talk to, there's always troves of children's book authors that have these questions that can be kind of unique and different, as opposed to a question that might just wrap up the whole industry in a whole. Children's books and like illustrations and stuff like that can get kind of specific from what I've seen. So in terms of, you said something about reviews. You see a book, you're like, no reviews, it's not really selling. It's hard to sell a book if you don't get reviews. So like you got to have the reviews first, but there are a ton of things that need to come into play, but like reviews are super important. So I'm curious, in terms of getting reviews for children's book authors, does it differ from like how I would get reviews for my, fast-paced military fiction, or if somebody writes romance? Like I know there's these different websites and tactics and strategies. Is there anything specifically unique about getting reviews for children's book authors, or is it kind of more or less the same?
Well, yes and no. There are differences and there are similarities. So obviously, the for any book to get a review, you really need to elicit an emotional response in the reader, so they feel, wow, I like this enough to go take the time to write a review, right? So that's the same. And for children's books, it's not really different in terms of, I'm talking about more picture books and books that the adults will read with the child, right? So in that sense, because the adult is experiencing the book with the child, if they love it, if the kid loves it, then that's a very good start. As you say, you have to sell copies, or you have to have a big launch plan, maybe give away some review copies. That's obviously, there's lots of strategies, which I'm sure some people will also go over. But so you can do free copies for reviews, you can do discount, you should do a big launch. You can use the same kind of sites like Story Origin and Book Funnel. You can also use to get reviews for kids' books. So there's a lot of overlap like that. But you should also, exactly as you should with adult books, you should ask, because most parents aren't going to think, oh, I read this cute book to my child, let me go on Amazon now and review it, right? They just don't think of that. So you should also ask. When it comes to something like middle grade, then it's a bit more tricky, because now the middle graders reading it, but often they're not going to review it. So in that case, it's really a matter of you need to build your email list or have some way to communicate to actually elicit the reviews, because as I say, most, even for early readers, when the kids are even younger, but they're reading it alone, or then it's obviously more challenging. So you really have to elicit those reviews with communication, basically, and asking for them. You can't sit and wait for them, right? Which is probably true for anyone anyway, to a large extent.
You can't expect people to do something without some kind of nudge or motivation. Yeah, that's across the board, just life in general, right?
Right.
Um, so I'm curious because so you mentioned email list there. I'm a big email list guy. It's what I focus on and help people with. So I love that stuff. But in terms of if I was you said middle grade fiction because then it's different because they're not reading the book with the parents. So then the parent isn't there with them being like, oh, this book's awesome. And then if you have a way to ask them, they're like, oh, of course, I loved reading it to my kid. It was a great book. But now we have, a middle schooler or somebody of closer to that age reading the book by themselves. And you mentioned an email list. So it's like, how do you navigate building an email list if you say that's your target audience? Because I don't feel like you're going to have a bunch of 12 and 13-year-olds on your email list. So are you still I would hope not, it would be weird. Are you still like you're marketing to the we talked about this a little bit off air. You're writing to the kid, but you're marketing to the parents. Is that still the same case in like a middle grade?
Yeah, absolutely. That would even be the case often in young adult, where, well, you have the young adult, like the younger young adult and the older young adult. So that would really be the case up until, if you think about it, a kid's going to be at least around 15, 16. It depends. This is obviously a gray area, but more or less, right? You're not even likely to have 13, 14-year-olds necessarily on your list. So yes, so that is the one big difference, of course, between like you marketing and a children's book author marketing, is that you're getting adults, parents, grandparents, teachers, maybe librarians are very good to look at on your list. And then you are speaking to them. And a lot of it will be very similar to adult books in terms of why should they be interested in the book? Why should they want the book? What are the benefits for their kids reading the book? What's the fun about the book, or maybe what the kid will learn from the book, or why they would enjoy it, all those kind of things, right? So often I find with, building email lists, children book authors really struggle, because most of the things out there for lead magnets or reader magnets are very geared either towards nonfiction, like adult nonfiction, or obviously to adult fiction, where you can say, well, do a prequel or do the first chapter, give away the first chapter in exchange for their email. If you've written a 32-page picture book, you can't give away the first chapter, right? So, and to do a prequel really isn't that realistic either. So that's where I see a lot of authors get stuck. So that's something that, I also have trainings on that, because I've really realized there's this gap where people like, what do I do? And it's interesting because, again, then with an adult fiction or nonfiction book, if you give away the ebook, that's a terrible reader magnet if the book is the only thing you have, right? You're not really going to sell the book after you gave away the ebook. With a picture book, you can actually give away the ebook, and people will often want to buy the hard copy. So there are differences like that. But there's also a lot of reader magnets that you can do that's thinking out of the box a little bit. Like if your book is related to getting a child to sleep in their own bed, or to learn about something, or even if it's just fun, we can do activity books or coloring books, and those are great. And activity books are really good. I always say rather do an activity book than a coloring book, because coloring pages have become too common. But there's a lot of other things you can do, like a guide for the parents to help them with something related to the book, right? So there's, as I said, if it's to get your child to bed, you can give them, the top 5 or the top 10 strategies that actually work to get the child to bed. And so you can build your list, because as we all know, if you're selling your book on Amazon, you're not going to be building your list. Then you're not going to be able to continue the relationship. You bring out the next book, you can't sell it because you don't have their contact details. You struggle with the reviews, etc. So that's kind of going off in a direction. But I agree with you. An email list is so important. It's, the statistics also show clearly that having an email list works very much in the favor of whoever has the list, right? So, and it's no different for children's book authors.
Yeah, okay, that's awesome. Yeah, and it's funny because I've asked you this question a couple of times, so you know this, and you've sent people from your world to my world when I run my email marketing and list building workshop. And without fail, every single time there's at least one children's book author that says, "Hey, what reader magnet should I use?" And you just covered those, because it's like it is different, because when I'm doing a reader magnet, or if I've got clients who aren't children's book authors, we're talking short stories, novellas, chapters of a book. If you have a ton of books, I got one client who's got like 19 books, so he can afford to give away, a book or two, which are awesome. People love the bigger the gift for the email exchange. From what I've seen, the bigger the response you get from people. But when you go to the children's book world and stuff like that, you have to get more creative.
Mm.
And like it was going to be a question, but you just nailed it with all the different ideas, like the workbooks. And I really like the kind of the guide for the parents that goes along with the book. I think that's really cool because that appeals to them, gets them on the list, and the kid gets the book to read, and they can both, enjoy. So I think that's awesome.
Mm.
So a question about, because I've talked to a couple people about this lately, about building a launch. Super important. Building the hype, getting the early reviews, getting people excited and stuff like that. Is it the same exact? Do you do it the same way as you do with like a typical novel in a different genre, or nonfiction? This is a fiction summit, but like or is there different like tactics and strategies that go in place with launching a children's book or a picture book that would be different, or is there a lot of overlap there?
There's a lot of overlap. So of course, again, you're speaking to the adults and not to the actual little readers, which I guess is the biggest difference. But you're still building a relationship, you're still building buzz, getting them excited. All of those things are the same. With children's books, it's kind of fun. You can share illustrations and character development, and there's a lot of visual sharing that you can do in terms of the journey of creating the book, which is kind of fun. But I wouldn't say the differences other than that are so major. What's also really nice with children's books is you can approach schools and even libraries, but especially schools. And sometimes authors have fantastic success because you're launching to classrooms and schools, which is obviously very beneficial if you can pull that off.
Yeah, right. Yeah, pulling it off. That's probably the key phrase there. So here's a question I have, and this kind of just popped in my head as we were talking. Is I hear this all the time. You ask, it's like when you go to the doctor. If you go to the doctor, if you go to 10 different doctors with the same problem, you'll get 10 different answers. So it's like I've talked to tons of authors, and it's like everybody wants to know how to make money as an author. And then it's like, well, how many books should you have? Should it be a series? Should you just do standalones? Like all these different things. So like, is it the same with the children's book world? Should you be writing in a series? Do standalones work better in the children's book world, or do you still think writing in a series is going to make a big difference if you're trying to make this a full-time career, sell books and make money and stuff like that?
Yeah, writing a series is always a plus, always. I mean, obviously, don't force it. With series, it can be literally a series that follow one another, like a chronological series where you read book 1, book 2, book 3. Obviously, in books for younger kids, or even some of the middle grade books and so on, we get more of, you call it a series, but you can call it a set of the same main character, but you can read book 5, then book 1, then book 9, then, it's not a, although you get that in adult fiction, of course, as well, but it's not a chronological series, especially in the younger kids' books. But if a child loves the main character, then of course, you know, you have the perfect, like Curious George or something, and then they'll buy 20 Curious George books because they love the character, right? So definitely I would recommend that, because we all know that the first sale is the hardest. So as soon as you've done that, we've all gone and looked for authors that we loved the first book. It's exactly the same with kids' books. You know, my daughter has all the worst book in the whole entire world, the worst love book in the whole entire world, the worst unicorn book in the whole entire world, the worst all of them. Like, you know, she loves them. So then you get the other ones. It's exactly that is definitely how it works. And then, not that you asked, but as a consideration in terms of making money as a children's book author, if you're writing a genre that's fully illustrated or highly illustrated, you know, with especially with a like fully color illustrated, if you want to make a living, I highly recommend checking out bulk printing, because with Ingram Spark and KDP, when you do print on demand, you're making $1, $2, because, and you have to make your hardback, especially like a high price point. If you want to give a discount, it becomes more or less not viable. So if you bulk print, there's obviously pros and cons. We can go into it if you want. I don't know, but you can, the profit is way bigger per book. So of course you have to commit more right from the beginning, because you're ordering bulk, you know, up front. But if someone is serious about making a living, make sure you have a solid marketing plan, so you don't order 1,000 books and then you don't know what to do with them. But you're going to make back your money and then make more money for the next book way faster.
Okay, that's a great point. I didn't think about that, because you're talking about the money it costs to print all those high resolution images, and then they're colored, and then it's like, even if the book's only 30 pages long, it's like those add up and they're expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the pricing on the book has to go up and your cut's going to go down and stuff like that. And you made a really good point about, you know, sometimes they're called series, but you can also do like sets, like the main characters. It makes me think of the Magic Treehouse series. Mary Osborne, I think. I can't remember her name. There's so many of those books, but it's like the same brother and sister. One book they're going after dinosaurs. One book they're the volcano or the ocean or the jungle. But it's like, it doesn't matter if you read this book or if you read the one that she wrote, the 20th book that she wrote. Like, it's all the character that they love, and then you can just pick and choose the story that's appealing. I think that's really cool. I think that was a great point that you made. Instead of thinking everything has to be chronological, which is always kind of my thought process in the genre that I write in. So yeah, that's a good point. So you were talking about bulk printing. So here's a question: if you're gonna like bulk print from like Ingram Spark or something, does that mean you need to be able to sell? You need to be finding other ways to sell your book, like, because it's not going to be through KDP. So should you be selling it through like your website? Can you sell it directly through other online stores, even if you bulk print through Ingram Spark? Like, how would that work?
Well, firstly, I don't actually recommend bulk printing through Ingram Spark. I recommend doing offset printing in China, because that's even where the big publishers do it. The price is better, the quality is way better, because it's a different method of printing, which I will not explain in detail now, but it's a completely different way. So the printing quality is higher. So you're going to get books that look better, which also makes them more likely to be accepted in bookstores and so on, which is a big plus. So there's a company called IAPC Books, iapcbooks.com, if anyone wants to check them out. They help authors to organize that, which is way easier than doing it yourself, because if you're doing it yourself, you're having to talk to a company, and you know, you need to really know your stuff, and they can negotiate bulk discounts because they work with so many authors. So people can definitely check them out. And I'm not affiliated in any way, they're just good. So if you're going to bulk print, to get back to your question, you can bulk print with Ingram Spark, but the discount is way less. And I'd rather just bulk print offshore then, or you can even do a local printer like Formax or so on, but that's not as inexpensive. Then yes, you absolutely have to have a plan in terms of storage, like really good storage where you can keep the books safe and they're not going to get damaged. But then you can sell through your own website. You can sell on Amazon, like you can open a seller central account, and you can sell like that. You can sell so you can so yes, you're going to distribute the books yourself now, basically, to answer the question, but you can sell through various outlets, right? If you can get into bookstores, which authors actually do get into local bookstores if they approach them. You can get a few books into this bookstore and that bookstore, but yes, you're not going to obviously be doing it through KDP and Ingram Spark. I wouldn't recommend taking your book off KDP and Ingram Spark. You can just leave it on there, but it gives you like I say, you can have a way better profit margin, and with higher quality books, which kind of opens the door for you to be able to approach bookstores more easily and so on. And with IAPC, just as a side note, they actually will do storage and shipping as well, which is a big plus. Then you don't have to like stuff into envelopes and ship them out and all of that stuff.
Yeah, every Friday you're walking down to the post office with a box of books to ship out. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Well,
right.
if
Yeah.
everything goes well, yes.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so kind of building off that, if we're selling print books through different avenues like your website, or you said something like a Seller Central account on Amazon or whatnot, how are you driving traffic to that stuff? Or are you is this where you start taking ads out? Are you using your email list to be like, hey, if you want the print copies, go to my website or go to this link to the Amazon? Like, how is the best way to kind of make sure traffic is constantly going to those places where you can actually get these books off your shelves or out of the warehouse that you just bulk printed?
Yeah, so you can absolutely run Amazon ads just as you could if you're on KDP. It just becomes more affordable. You should always build your email list. It doesn't matter how you're going to publish, doesn't matter how you print, you should build your email list and let them know. Some authors will even say, go to my website for blah, or to get this thing. And they actually will drive people off Amazon to their website, to say, go to my website, and if you get this, you'll get a freebie with it. Or you obviously have to be smart about how you do it, but then you're making a sale that has a better profit margin for you, and you're getting the person's email when they buy the book. So it's a double win on that. And then you can do any other kind of marketing if your book is on Amazon or on other outlets like that, because if you're going to do an email blast through Fussy Librarian or any of those platforms, you can, the same things apply. So just because your book isn't on KDP, the buyers don't see a difference necessarily, right, when they get onto your book page as such.
Okay, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I think people get kind of caught up in this, like all KDP, or people who go wide, but like there are other avenues, because I don't hear a lot of people, and maybe I'm just naive in this aspect. Maybe I'm not talking to the right people that sell directly through their websites. I don't know how big of a thing that is. I don't know if it's something that used to be and it died off, or if it's something that's kind of catching on. But kind of any way to get more exposure or have your books in more places for people to grab. Is that a good idea or a bad idea? Because I know people who are gun ho KDP nowhere else, and then I know people who are like, I want my book anywhere and everywhere.
It's totally a good idea to have your book in different places. At the same time, 80% of the ebooks in the world, English speaking or English ebooks, are sold on KDP, 80%. So you have to look at your ebook sales versus your physical copies, right? And in this case, that's where the big difference between adult books and, yeah, like picture books or children's books, illustrated books. Adults want the book to read to the kid. They don't, ebooks are still, ebooks are, people get ebooks, but the physical books for picture books are way more popular still than ebooks. So that's where the big difference comes in. And that's where I would say, like, if 90% of your sales are ebooks, then that's a very different equation, right, to a children's book author. So you can, or being on more in more outlets, being on more retailer sites is never a bad thing. I don't see how you're really going to lose. It's always good to go wide, I would say, with Amazon, with KDP and Ingram Spark. But I think in that regard, there is quite a big difference between your picture book or selling like your physical copies, and if you're relying more on the physical copies or the ebook sales, basically.
Okay, so is physical copies, because I know we're in an ebook world, we're in a digital world, but with children's books and picture books where kids want to physically have it in their hands and parents want to be able to go pull it off the bookshelf, and sit down with their kids. My kids love reading, so like every night they get to pick a book, they bring it in, and we read it, each one to them, because they just love it. But it's like I don't feel like that would be as enjoyable if I was whipping out my Kindle and we were like flipping through the digital screen and stuff like that. So I would be of the assumption, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong on this, that physical copies in the children's book world and illustrated book world is more important than the ebooks.
Yes, it's more
Okay.
popular, so it is more important. I always advise that people also have an ebook for the simple reason that you can sometimes give it away or you can steeply discount it. It can be like a bit of a taster for people. So that's why I say still have an ebook. But yes, if you're only going to have an ebook or only a physical copy, then have a physical copy.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I was about to ask you, should you even have an ebook? But you just answered that question. Okay, cool. So I've got one last question for you, and that would be, what would be the number one, marketing tip or piece of marketing advice when it comes to, your children's book in terms of marketing and selling and getting it in front of the right people? Like, is there like a one component that you think is so vital and important that it's like if you ignored everything else, this is the one thing you should focus on?
Well, I mean, I would say build your email list, which you'll probably like that answer, but that's honestly my answer. Obviously, as a children's book author, also prior to that, you have to know your target audience. And I always say your target audience is not adults of 5 to 8 year olds or parents of 5 to 8 year olds, to state that much better. Because which kind of 5 to 8 year olds? I don't love romance and I love certain kinds of books, just as you do, just as other people do. So kids also like certain kinds of books and they don't really like other kinds of books. So is it adults who are buying books for, maybe girls or boys, or maybe both, or who love soccer or ballet or fantasy or funny books? You have to really narrow it down a bit and then figure out where those people are, create a reader magnet and get them onto your email list. It's I've just seen it time and time again. Not having an email list, it's almost like you're just always starting from zero. Like you just don't have people that you can just say, hey, this is happening, here's my next book, right? So if you have 1,000 people, 500 people, 5,000 people, you can say, here's my next book. It makes all the difference in the world. There's actually, Nick Stevenson has done this study. I do not memorize numbers, but the difference between authors with an email list and authors without, I mean, I wouldn't, it's very, 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 very huge, the difference in terms of income, making a living, and so on. And I wasn't surprised to see that at all, because I see that's what I see as well. Like it's, if you don't have an email list, who are you talking to? Social media is fine and well, but it's not an effective mode of communication, really, right? Whereas email is.
Yeah, I agree. I always tell people if I'm sending emails out or if I'm talking to somebody, like if I catch myself using the word like building your audience and stuff like that, I either stop myself and correct myself, and I usually say build your list, but or because I think your audience being like if somebody's like social media versus your email list, I don't think they're the same thing. They're not comparable. I've seen the numbers. I've looked at this stuff, and I've taken some deep dives into these numbers and stuff like that. It's not even close. And on top of that, outside the numbers, an email list you own. You get to say what you want to say, talk about what you want to talk about. You can't get shut down out of nowhere because they didn't like the comment you made or something was offensive or something like that. All that stuff drives me absolutely up the freaking wall. So I stay away from social media, and I know there are ways to use it. I've talked to plenty of successful authors who like love social media. They use it, they build their community in it and stuff like that. I've tried. I don't love it. The fact of just having to log into Facebook makes me want to throw up. Sorry, any hardcore Facebook users out there, but like that's true. I love my email list. I love sending out personal, just today at the time of this recording, I sent an email out today to my list of the story of when I lost my older brother to a suicide. On no planet would I have put that on social media ever. You couldn't pay me $1 million to put that information on social media, but and I can't tell you how many wonderful responses I got from people. Obviously they give you their condolences, even though it's been 14 years, or they share similar experiences, and all that's doing And you've probably had similar encounters with your list in terms of when you share something, like you're building this connection with the person on the other side that you'll more than likely never meet. Um,
Mm.
but the fact that the social media is, I mean, the email list, in my opinion, is way more intimate in terms of connecting with your audience, is why I think it's far and beyond, focusing all your attention on social media. But that's just my 2 cents. I could rain on about that for hours,
Yeah.
but I won't.
Yeah. Ditto everything you say.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. So before we hop off here, do you have anything else that you think we didn't touch on that you would like to maybe reiterate or point out? I think we covered a lot, very detailed towards children's book authors, which I think is super important. But yeah, like they say, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Well, there's probably a lot I could say, but I think I will just reiterate the email list. And as I say, I always say to people, any reader magnet is better than no reader magnet. Just make one, just put it out there. If you get one email every 3 days, that's an email you didn't have, right? So just get started, just get it going. Like the best time to get it going is right now. And then you'll learn as well. You'll learn what worked or what didn't work, or you can start figuring it out. It's a little bit like you can't edit a blank page. You can't edit a blank marketing slate, right? Like you have to try stuff and then see where it goes.
Yeah, you don't start, it's never going to get started because you got to start somewhere. Yeah, I love
Right.
that. Okay, cool. So, I actually don't remember whether or not you do, but do you have anything for the audience that's watching and listening right now? And it's okay if you don't.
Yeah, I totally do. It's
Okay.
called the Complete Children's Book Creation Blueprint. I hope I need a shorter name. I think I got that right. And it's basically a step-by-step guide from how to get started with your book. Like, what are the age groups? How do you even know who you're writing for? And then takes you all the way through all the steps that you need to complete.
Okay, that's awesome. All right, so we'll have that link at the bottom of this interview so people can go grab that. That's free, right? Right, correct?
Yes.
100% free. There we go. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So we'll have that link there. And then if people want to go check you out and learn more about you, where would be the best place for them to go do that? And if you say Facebook, Karen, I'm gonna shut this interview down so fast.
Yeah, no, we have similar feelings about social media,
Okay.
but we won't go into that. So, childrensbookmastery.com, if you're, of course, interested in learning any of this stuff. And for anyone who might have been going, oh, I would love to check out the illustrations, that's getyourbookillustrations.com.
Okay, awesome. And again, we'll have these links down there so you don't have to memorize them or be writing them down while she's talking. I just wanted her to be able to say that out loud. So when you see the links under, it makes sense. All right, Miss Karen, that was awesome. Thank you for taking your time. I know it's, I think, 6 hours later where you are than where I am. So it's a little bit further along in the day. So thank you for doing this. I always love having you on and talking to you. And I think this was fun and awesome. I think people watching and listening can at least take one thing away. I did. I'm not a children's book author, but when I come across somebody new and they have questions, I'll actually be able to answer them better because of this talk. So I appreciate that.
Nice. Thank you. I enjoyed chatting with you.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Thank you for either watching or listening, however you're doing this. And we'll see you guys in the next one.